to let you know a little bit about the headspace I'm in these days. The subtitle of the book I'm reading right now is Mothering Against the Apocalypse. And it was fitting to be reading this book all week as we have been anticipating hosting the prom after party at our house last night, which felt a little apocalyptic. It was a great night. Everyone's safe and lovely, and they're sweet kids, and they're all home safely now. Back to the book, which, in all seriousness, is a collection of essays in which Emily Rabateau confronts, among other issues, climate collapse, societal breakdown, systemic racism, destructive politics, and the pandemic years. You know, the things you deal with when you're trying to raise two young boys, as she is. Crucially, she is trying to raise two young boys with a sense of hope. Her stories are about surviving and creating a family while living in a world that by many accounts is falling apart. It's a tale for our times. It's also a tale for all times. It can be hard to recognize where we are in time when we listen to the stories from Scripture. It's difficult to hold a sense of timing because of the way the story comes to us in a layering of moments that create almost a multiverse effect. In the present moment of the gospel, Jesus is sitting at the table, having just finished his last meal with his friends, and Judas has just gotten up to leave to go do some very dirty work. Between the meal and leaving the table to go to the garden, Jesus tells all those who are still in the room that they are not servants but friends, and that they ought to live in love. Actually, live inside of love. Abide in love. We'll come back to that, but the layering of time also means that the story is written down in a present moment much later, between the resurrection and the time when the church finds its way forward. The Gospeler is writing at the end of a chaotic century, full of violence and fear and confusion. And us, we're reading the story on this present Sunday, 2,000 years later, midway through the 50 days of Easter as we approach the Feast of Pentecost, and revel and slog through all that May brings. And we're listening to the story inside a present time in which we know the facts about climate change, yet before the catastrophe shapes enough of our priorities to ward it off, when we know the history and cruelty of racism, and before we've learned how to fully repair the broken bonds between us. And in this present moment, all of us, you and I, are living between so many different inflection points. Between election cycles, or between diagnosis and treatment, or between the hurt and the forgiveness, or between the question and the answer. We're always living between moments. It's kind of what makes it a life, right? So let's go back to that conversation at the table and the pivotal in-between time. The meal is over, but the only person who's gotten up from the table is Judas. And even as he makes his way toward betrayal, the others are still hanging around, bellies full, listening to Jesus. And in this moment, as he knows the end is rushing at him, Jesus says, "Abide in love." Abide 3 times, and love 9 times. In this one little snippet of conversation, as Jesus understands that he is saying farewell, Jesus tells us where and how to live. Notably, he doesn't suggest making a run for it before the armed guard comes to arrest him. Nor does he deny the reality of what's unfolding. There's no pretending here that things are less dire than they are. And abide in love. To abide means to stay right where life is happening, to make ourselves at home, even in the uncertainty and danger of this world, as it has always been uncertain and a little bit dangerous. Jesus tells his friends and us to set down roots right where we are and to find the source of love here, in the room after dinner, in the spin of our frenetic lives, between the breaking news updates. Stay put and love. Stay put in love. Back to my new friend Emily, who is mothering in the apocalypse. Even as she is clear-eyed about the state of the world, the precarity of her home, and the risk of even trick-or-treating for her sons, she persists in taking joy, complete joy in them, and in loving the old house that they are renovating and the city they call home. Her gaze moves from literal warning signs about global warming to birds and bird murals painted around New York City. And if you can believe it, there's really very little sense of fatalism in her declaration that this is what she can do. She can love her children and take care of her garden and vote and invite friends to sit around her dinner table and talk about hard things. Just as there's no real hint of despair in Jesus calling his followers to friendship and love and joy, even while one of their friends plots the next chapter. Abide and love. Abide in love. It's always the in-between time, friends, and the news is always difficult. So some questions we must consider are where we will live and how we will live given the facts. We do have choices. We could live in fear. We might live in denial. We might be tempted to keep moving away, as if, like Jonah, we thought we could escape to someplace else, someplace easier. We could hole up until things finally get better. Jesus got up from the table and went to the garden to pray and to be arrested. He lived in the very real world, not pretending it was anything other than broken, and he loved that world. He loved in that world. I don't always know how to do this, how to love this broken place, these broken people, my own broken self. I'm wondering now if staying put is in and of itself an act of love. I don't mean to abide abuse or hurt. I do mean to abide and love even when it's hard. And if we look around, we see that there are ways that this is shown to us. The way that Calvary has stayed put through a multitude, a multiverse, you might say, of present moments, including slave auctions and wars, a bustling downtown life, and an abandoned season, to stay rooted so that we can continue to bear fruit. Or the way that the stories of Scripture abide through millennia, steadfastly telling and retelling a story of love in disparate times and desperate places. Or the way a mother can repair a home and teach her children the names of birds, even the endangered ones that grow more and more scarce. The way friends linger around a table to listen, whether or not they know it will be the last time. Abiding in love is love. Abiding and loving are two sides of the same coin. Showing up is love. Sticking around is love. Choosing to live in hope, seeking moments of delight and joy, these are just some of the ways that we abide in love. Some stories are about friendship and loss at the same time. Some dinner conversations are about surviving in the aftermath. And sometimes it's hard not to get antsy and want to move away or play pretend. But always another simultaneously unfolding story is about lasting bonds of friendship, about waiting for the harvest of fruit to come on another day. Some dinner conversations are a prelude to a much bigger, longer story that's hard to imagine. In this present moment, we are invited to make ourselves at home in discomfort, to make ourselves at home in an imperfect and broken world, to make ourselves at home and to love it all, to make ourselves at home inside love.